3:30 today.
Yeah, you're fine. We'll get in and out. Yeah, I usually go at a pretty good clip. Where are you located?
New York City. How about you?
I'm in Kansas City, Missouri.
Cool.
Yeah. Great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out.
Sure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, you bet. So before we get into your work, I want to know first and foremost, 4 years ago, this pandemic, and especially in New York, the way it played out, there was so much uncertainty that went into it. But on a cellular level, how did you survive that time period, and how did it ultimately change the way that you do things?
Is this? Oh, we're recording. Okay, cool. I was like, is this part of the interview?
Well, yeah, no, it
Um,
is. Actually, I come from jazz radio, so this is like the beginning for me.
oh, awesome. Okay. So, yes, it absolutely affected me. So, in 2020, I mean, first of all, we did lose people that were close to us. We lost my father-in-law in the beginning of 21, which was the same month that I signed with my book agent. During the pandemic, I saw so many artists, clients struggling because they really didn't have the fundamentals. Really, artists who came to me to work with me, they didn't have some of these fundamentals in place, like an email list, and they were too reliant on kind of foot traffic that was happening. And many, not just artists, but entrepreneurs get very comfortable with what works. And then something like a pandemic happens that upends what was used to work. If you don't have those fundamentals in place, then things can go haywire really fast. So
Yeah.
it did affect me both on a personal level, but also really changed how I was looking at what I saw as my mission in the world. And so 2020 is really when I shifted my focus from having a balanced business. Balance is probably the wrong word, but having a business that looked equally at both my own art as an income stream, creating online classes and coaching, to really shifted more towards helping other artists get these fundamentals in place, and also publishing this book to help not just artists but any creative entrepreneur have the right fundamentals in place so that when it can survive something like a pandemic.
And your book's wonderful, and that's the thing that's so refreshing about it. There's a lot of people that are creative that get into the world of art, and there's just no clear roadmap, you know? It's one of those things almost like having a child or moving out for the first time. There's all of these things that are big about it, but it's such a good roadmap. What was it ultimately the pandemic that pushed you to this point, or had you been thinking about coming up with kind of a guide for people to be better entrepreneurs and artists?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's going to be hard for me to tease out the answer because I know that people when they turn 50, and I'm 55 years old. So when you're in your 50s is when you start to think more about legacy. So that was the same time as the pandemic. It just made it more clear that this is what I need to do during this time, but I'm sure my age and stage of life had a lot to do with that decision to start focusing more on the legacy aspects of how I was making contribution.
So let's get to the heart and soul. There's so many things that go into you being a creative and an author and all of these things that you do. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day, and one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" What's your answer?
Okay, the short answer I usually give people is I'm an artist because otherwise their eyes glaze over. And
Yeah.
then the second easy soundbite is I help other artists learn the business side of the biz the business side of being a person who needs to make money in the world. So we all have that available to us to make more money with a living. Whatever business you're into, whether it's you're creating cookies or weight loss programs, or you're selling paintings or doing anything else, you have to have these fundamentals in place. So do you want me to give you the third grade version of how I would teach it?
Sure.
Ah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I talk about this inside Artpreneur. There's 5 fundamentals that make up any business. So whether you have a lemonade stand, a cookie stand, or you're a painting stand, you need to have the pricing, what you're producing, who you're selling it to, prospecting, how you're selling it, promoting, And productivity is how you manage your day. So you're focusing on what really matters. So they all begin with the letter P. So that makes it really easy to remember. But it's all about pricing, production, prospecting, promotion, and productivity. Those are the five fundamentals that make up any successful business. All I do inside Artpreneur is I really translate it in a way that artists see that this applies to them too. And in the book Artpreneur, it's not just artists who do painting. We defined art very broadly: visual art, performing art. So once you define it broadly, really anything can be inserted into that ART box.
So when you were in the 3rd grade, was it always gonna be art for you? What was your dream?
No, I had no idea. Third grade, definitely not. In fourth grade, my teacher said I was the class artist. There was nothing there for her to say that. By the way, I was the new kid in school. I think she felt sorry for me because I was just that weird. And my job as class artist was to glue toothpicks onto the jack-o'-lantern pumpkin. And she had decided ahead of time what this pumpkin was going to look like. So there was no ability involved there. But when she said, "You're the class artist," I chose to believe her. Oh, I have ability, which is why it's so important. These messages that other people tell us and the messages we tell ourselves, these become the narrative that drive our lives. It's just a thought. I chose to believe it. I chose to believe that this was possible for me. And yet, I didn't believe I could make a living from it because of all the other stories I was hearing. So I did take the practical route and I went to work for Wall Street.
Okay. So, are you from New York originally?
Mostly. So I did live in the South for a few years. I lived in Atlanta. I lived in Florida. That's why you'll hear like a flat A mixed in with my New York accent. So, but I have been spent the last 25 years in New York. And I was working on Wall Street when the World Trade Center was bombed. And I was in the working world when 9/11 happened.
So, was that the moment, was 9/11 the moment that you turned and said, "Art, this is what I'm gonna do?"
Well, that makes a better story, but the truth is that was the moment that I said, "Not Wall Street anymore."
Right.
Like, find something else to do. I still didn't believe that I could make a living from my art. So at first, I took a job at a gym as a Pilates instructor. And while working at the gym, they were teaching me how to sell personal training packages. And that's, Joe, when I had my aha moment. I was like, okay, everything they're teaching me, I can use to sell my art. And that's when I focused on selling my art. So
Gotcha.
it's a little bit of a zigzag. I think, like many of us, it's like there's never a clear path. It's like things become obvious only in hindsight. But
You know, it seems as though 9/11 was kind of the pre-COVID moment for New Yorkers. You know, there was a psychological snap that I think a lot of people went through because 'cause I've talked to New Yorkers that were there. So, I was at my dad was born in Brooklyn and raised in Long Island. There's been a lot of ties to New York in my life. And I remember going in '95 with my cousin on one of those London double deckers and seeing the World Trade Center and seeing the globe that survived and looking up and being like, "Wow, they actually somebody made this." So I was in the back of a water taxi. I was backpacking in Europe. I was in Venice when it happened, and I cut myself off. So I flew to Paris on, I believe, the 5th or 6th. So I'm in the back of a water taxi, and a guy just starts shooting his arms up. And he's like, Nuevo York. I'm like, are you talking about the 93 bombing? Like, I didn't know what was going on. And then all of a sudden I go back, get to the hotel, and it's like, wow. And I didn't see the actual planes going to the buildings until I got home. They wouldn't play anything on the airplane coming home, and I had to really fight to get on a plane because I had a flight from Paris back home, and it didn't exist, so I had to go to London and go through Gatwick, and it was very strange. I felt like I was in a Hemingway novel, but I remember my dad as a New Yorker telling me, "You better protect your passport, and you better keep your eyes open because we're in a new world all of a sudden, overnight." So,
yeah, yeah.
it was a strange time.
So I was working in the World Trade Center during the 93 bombing. And that is something
Okay.
I talk about in my book. It's chapter 2. I talk about that story. and we didn't really have cell phones then,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Yeah.
So we didn't know what was going on. I was on the second floor that day in the cafeteria, and the power went out, and we were told it was a Con Ed failure. Those who are not from New York, Con Ed is our big power company. We were told it was just a power failure. So my girlfriend and I was only 24 at the time, so I don't think I would have done this at age 55, but at age 24, I took flights, 37 flights of stairs up to return to my desk. Okay.
Wow.
And then we looked out the windows when I got back up to my desk, and we could see what was actually happening. And you could see out the window. So I was at Severn World Trade, which directly faced the tower that got bombed. For those who don't know, there was a van with a bomb in the basement, but the smoke went all the way up and it shut down the power grid in that area. And that was the real what happened, why the power went out in the cafeteria. But there was a generator that kept the computers running. And my coworkers, when I got up there, I mean, you could look out the window, you could see the smoke, you could see people smashing windows, you could see people throwing computers out the windows, you could see helicopters circling the building. It was like a Schwarzenegger movie. It was awful. But my coworkers were working. They were in front of their computers. And I wasn't jaded yet, so I was like, "Excuse me, I'm leaving. I'm getting out of here." So when 9/11 happened, I had like PTSD to that moment.
Gotcha.
And I knew that if I was still in that towers I would have been one of the dead ones. So that's why I said I'm never ever going back to that world again, because they don't value lives over money.
Yep. I get it. So speaking of value, what was the painting that you sold or got a reaction where you knew this is my life? I need to create and do this for a living.
Okay, I love this question. So, I mean, there were a lot of mini moments, but I think the biggest one was when I painted my son in his Batman costume.
Oh yeah.
So, my son was 4 years old, and like many 4-year-old boys, he was obsessed with the superheroes. And every day after school, he put on this Batman costume with the sculpted muscles, and he was so proud of that painting. And I wasn't a dummy. I stuck that painting, that frame painting, up in the hallway whenever my son's friends came over, and my son was like, look, look, John, look at this painting of me, blah, blah, blah. And then the moms would come to pick up Johnny, and Johnny be like, look what this mom did. So that was really a pivotal moment for me. But I continued to do those kind of um it's not that I was doing anything scammy or sleazy. It was just there was no social media. I was letting my son be an influencer for me.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's the best kind of canvas. I remember when my son was born in '04, I did a lot of paintings of him, different like, and I did a painting of his ear. So I do visual arts. This is one of mine behind me, and I've had this project for years where I've put my artwork out on the streets, and I have a note that says, "Keep it or pass it along, but just take a picture and let me know." So I went to Manitou Springs, and I dropped it off there, and somebody found it, and it was a painting of my son's ear, and they totally love it, but they didn't realize the story. And I said that was my son's ear pretty quick after he was born, and they were just totally into it, which was totally cool. So yeah, when you can validate a life you brought into this world and art, and someone really responds to it, it just kind of makes that existence of it that much more powerful.
And there's a couple of things I wanted to circle back to. So you had mentioned how 9/11 is very much like COVID. So what happened to me during 9/11, it was like a veil had been lifted, and whatever's not whenever you have a crisis in your life, it always lifts a veil and whatever's not working in your life. The pandemic was like that for many people. There's nothing like a crisis that's going to show you what's working and what isn't in your life. And that crisis could be something like 9/11, a pandemic. It could be a personal crisis, a diagnosis, a death, a divorce, something like that can really show you, okay, things need to change now. But this was something that happened on a more collective scale. that people were looking for more meaning in their life. So some people needed more meaning by becoming artists, and some people needed more meaning in their life by enjoying more art, because art is something that gives meaning to our lives. Art matters in that way. We need art in this world for that
Yeah.
reason.
So what gallery in the world have you been to that always brings you comfort, that you love the best? What art gallery?
That's such a great question. I'm very lucky to be in New York City. We have some of the best galleries in the
Oh yeah.
world, but we also have some of the best museums in the world. So I really enjoy the museums that are here. The Metropolitan Museum of Art never fails me. Uh, the Museum of Modern Art is also a great museum. The Whitney's good, but I was recently down in Atlanta, and the High Museum of Art has some really phenomenal art.
Okay.
So I really enjoyed that art museum a lot. I was very impressed by their collection.
So in this pursuit as a creative and a writer, who's been a hero for you?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so do I get to answer with more than one?
Oh
Like,
yeah. Are you kidding?
yeah.
Roundtable it.
Okay, because it's like being asked what my favorite ice cream flavor is. Like, why do I have to choose?
Yeah. Why can't you have
Okay,
more than one?
that's right. Okay, so one artist that jumps to mind, painter, is Alice Neal. She was working in the 1920s. She was born in 1900. She actually lived to, I believe, 1987. And she recently had a posthumous exhibit at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. I liked her because she does more of like psychological portraits, but she also had this attitude where people would tell her, you can't do this, you're a girl. And instead of discouraging her, that motivated her. So I just love that attitude because I'm very much that way. When somebody tells me I can't do something, it just makes me want to do it 10 times as much.
Yeah.
So yeah, she would definitely be a hero right there. I'm trying to think if I can think of an author off the top of my head. I know J.K. Rowling's gotten a bad rap lately because of her politics, but I never get tired of the Harry Potter series. I've read the all 7 books 3 times. That was my pandemic project. I thought, okay, I'll read all the Harry Potter books, but I had read them all by June 2020 and the pandemic wasn't over yet. So I like to get lost in that fantasy world whenever I can. And there's a lot of wisdom in those books.
There is. Are you an audiobook listener?
I've done both. Yeah. So for Harry Potter, I've done audio,
Yeah.
the Dale, help me, Dale's, what's the name of there's more than one,
Yeah.
more than one, uh, um, Audible reader,
Yeah,
and
there's an yeah.
recently purchased the UK version because I figured let me compare.
Yeah.
So
Get in the soup, get the English. I don't remember what mine was, but it was really good. It was done very well. It was a
the
long time ago.
yeah, the ones that are published in America, and I'm assuming those are the ones that you've listened
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
Um, so that's Jim Dale. Okay, Dale's the
Okay.
last name. Jim Dale. He's the one who narrates the ones that we get in the US, but Audible recently put out the ones that were in the UK. Stephen something. Don't remember. Sorry, listeners. Don't remember.
Yeah.
But I'm going to compare and I'll let you know.
So we went to Universal about a month ago and we went to the Harry Potter section. Oh my God. It was the weirdest thing. They had butterbeer. It was like all the music, everything was moving in the shops. It was like the set was perfect. And both times we went 2 days in a row. You take a Hogwarts, an actual train, and they got this movie playing on the window as you go, and there's all this stuff. Both times it completely was totally London. It rained like crazy when we were there. We had to get ponchos and it was just totally weird. But it's a trip. You get in there and you're just like the music's playing, everything looks like it, like set designers were there. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen in my life. Totally like mind-blowing, but strange. Have you ever been there?
No, but you make me want to go.
Oh my God. It's like weird in a good way that they can do that, you know. Um, so I'm curious if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now that you're fascinated by, who would it be? Whether it's a creative or otherwise.
Okay, and I get to ask them questions and all that. You know, my husband's
Yeah.
always asked me, would you like to have lunch with Tim Gunn? He's the Project Runway,
Yeah, he's a
right?
cool cat.
And yeah, I said, no, 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 I'd rather have lunch with Heidi Klum because she's so beautiful. And I know that makes me sound really shallow, but that's not going to be my answer. Okay, so who would I really want to have lunch with? Okay, so I'm fascinated by have you ever heard of Brooke Castillo?
No.
So she's somebody who's built a life coaching business where she makes almost $100 million a year. So that fascinates me. And
Yeah,
I would love to have lunch with her and like just soak up that energy,
yeah,
like whatever she has to say and whatever that aura is and that energy, like just let me rub some of that off on me. So, but yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
So you have to you in all of these pursuits, you're pretty diversified. You have right brain things going on, left brain things going on. How do you moderate all of those things to get them done at a high caliber and save enough to evolve as a human being yourself?
Ooh, great question. Okay. So I think it's very important to get, it's going to sound so corny. I sound like my mother. It's very important to eat right and get a good night's sleep.
That's it.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really
Right.
true. And I also, I prioritize my health over everything. I get a full night's sleep. I eat really well. I'm not good at cooking, so I subscribe to like a very healthy meal delivery service that helps me out with that. On my schedule, you'll see the first thing Monday through Friday is the gym. I don't start my work day till 10 o'clock and I end it by 6.
Okay.
So, if not earlier. So I definitely prioritize that self-care. And then when you're running a business, I don't care if you're a painter or a coach or whoever you are, you can only go so far if you're doing it by yourself. You're going to go a lot further if you get some help. Even if it is what I like to talk about in my book, Artpreneur, a business babysitter. Even if you just get a teenager to help you out with tasks that don't need to be done by you, some repetitive things, see what you can outsource because yeah, you could have more hours in the day, but you're not going to have more energy. So it's always a lie if you say to myself, if I only had 3 more hours in the day. No, we don't. We only have a limited amount of energy and we really only have a limited amount of genius time. Like they've done many studies that show that our genius time is limited to about 4 hours. So doing more is not going to create more results.
I've always thought about an intern for that. If you
Yeah.
could get somebody that could just be interested in, you know, getting a resume builder, and if revenue is generated, then they get revenue. I mean, I remember when I did an internship at a radio station, and we used to do ads for a local steakhouse, and I was lucky to get food, and I had to go get the food. It was like that was just the way it worked. But you got
Yeah.
invaluable experience, you know?
1000%. So my first hires were quote unquote interns. I always liked to pay them. The reason I call them business babysitters is I would pay them the going rate for a babysitter.
Yeah,
So when I first started hiring people, which I want to say that was about 15 years ago, it was $10 an hour. That was the fair rate back then.
yeah.
Now I think it's more like 15 or 20, but it's not $30 an hour. It's not $40 an hour. So and you don't need a lot to make a big difference. Like
Yeah,
5 hours a week can make all the difference for somebody who's
absolutely.
just starting out.
So, of all of the creativity you've put in the world, your book and your artwork, what's the best fan letter you've gotten back? One that just blew you away?
I get them every day, so it's really hard to choose. But like even yesterday, I got one somebody who they're not even in my coaching program. They just read my book and said they read my book and started trying out those sales techniques and they worked. And that I can touch lives that way, that's huge.
Yeah. So, of all of the things that you've accomplished in your life and evolved into, what are you the proudest of?
Is it cliche to see my family?
I mean, that's always the
You know,
cliche,
like, yeah,
but it's
okay. But let's say if it wasn't my family, I'm very
yeah,
proud of the book because that was really hard.
yeah,
For some reason, I didn't have any issues with going after getting a book contract and an agent. I just didn't know that was supposed to be hard. Therefore, I didn't have a problem doing it.
yeah,
And I believed. It's like when you believe, you keep trying. It's like if somebody tells you there's $1 million in one of these 10 envelopes, if the first five, there's nothing in it, you just keep opening those envelopes faster. Like, okay, well, it's not this one. Let me open the next one. But the minute I signed that book contract, I said, oh my God, they made a huge mistake. Like,
pressure.
I went through so much mind drama during the entire thing. I even almost sent my book advance back when we had finished the round of copy editing. I was like, oh, nobody at HarperCollins likes this book. I should just give them their money back. And, you know,
Yeah,
like, I don't know why I put myself through all that mind drama because
yeah.
it was unnecessary. But I'm very proud that I finished it.
So the thing about being a creative is that you have to go through an incredible amount of rejection and growth and
Mm,
evolution, and
yeah.
it's hard to explain it to people. Every
Yeah.
time I'm on a call, a cat comes around. I love it. It always warms my heart. I'm a cat guy, so I just saw your cat. So there's all of this growth. So if you had a dream tonight and you ran into your 18-year-old version of you and you had to give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained, what advice would you impart? And would that version of you listen?
No.
Okay,
I mean, if
right.
I saw that 18-year-old version of myself, I'd probably run the other way. I mean, do you remember what you were like at age
Yeah,
18?
it's
I'd be like, oh my God, that was me. No, please.
yeah,
Please.
yeah,
Problem is like you need to go through that journey. It's so corny. I'm going to say it anyway, but it's like Dorothy at the end of The Wizard of Oz when Glinda, she just tapped your three heels together. And they're like, wait, that's all I had to do all this time. Why didn't
yeah,
you tell me that back in Munchkin Land?
right.
And right. I was like,
Yeah,
well, you had to kind of go through the journey.
yeah,
So I was like, it's like that in a lot of these stories. So
yeah,
wait a minute. All they had to do is hop on the back of the eagles and that takes them back. Why didn't they go that way to put the ring down in Mordor? I'm talking about Lord of the Rings for those people who are not as nerdy as we apparently are.
yeah.
So, like, why couldn't they have just hopped on the eagle? Or why couldn't they have used a time turner and killed Voldemort in the orphanage?
Uh-huh.
It's like all these things, but that's life. Life
Yeah,
is the journey. The whole point of life is for us to evolve as
yeah,
humans.
yeah. I get it. So at the end of the day, you have all these circles of people that know you, the readers, those that lay eyes on your artwork, that know you from a business perspective, family, friends, everybody. But ultimately, you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Mm, beautiful question. It does keep changing. I'm still an artist. My art itself has changed. I do see right now that I am in the process of writing my second book. So that has changed. I'm connecting dots that seem obvious to me because of just the weird way that I think about things, but I'm learning are not obvious to other people. So I'm just here to tell my truth and share what I see. And some people will listen and some people won't, and I'm okay with that.
So if we get off this call, a time machine pulls up, you can get in there and go back in time and just stand behind one artist and the whole lexicon of artists that have been in the world and just watch them create and watch how they did it and see what their studio looked like and see what they would mumble to themselves or what they were listening to outside, the texture of what was going on. Who are you going to go watch?
Wow, what a really good question. I think Van Gogh is a little bit scary, so I don't think
Right.
I want to
Yeah.
stand behind him. Uh,
Because he would be getting in a knife fight with Gauguin. There would be some weird thing that would happen.
oh, yeah, he's like was on the spectrum or bipolar or something, something.
Drinking
Well,
too
I
much
mean, it's like,
turpentine.
I mean, and they've documented that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about some of would I want to stand behind the abstract expressionist woman, but they smoke too much, so I don't want to stand behind the
Yeah.
smoker.
Way too much.
Too much, right? Um, let's see. I'm hearing them mumble to themselves. Yeah, let's how about why not Ernest Hemingway? So
Yeah.
I'll sit behind him, look
Yeah.
over his shoulder. I want to see like how many times he crosses out what he's writing.
Yeah. You know what's amazing when I think about stuff like that, like even Walt Disney, their paths were very formative in Kansas City. Walt Disney grew up from here. He had an art studio here, and they used to have a place called Electric Park, and he studied it before he went to California. Hemingway came through here, and Kansas City was big in his development. It's so weird that those
Yeah.
paths, but I think about that sometimes with those ghosts that were here, like what it would be like to just see, and especially I have a jazz show, like all of the jazz musicians that came through here. And New York is the playground now. That's the center of the universe. But it's fascinating to think how it evolved over time. Um, I love your book and your work. If anyone out there wants to pick it up, they want to look at what you're doing, delve into any of the aspects of the myriad pieces of your world. Where do they go?
Okay, well, if you like the Kool-Aid I've been serving today, there's more of that on the Inspiration Place podcast. And if you want to check out my book absolutely free, I do give away the first chapter. If you go to schulmanart.com/believe, and that's SCHULMANART, schulmanart.com/believe. I'll send you chapter 1 absolutely free.
Excellent. This has been wonderful. We got out in good time here. Thank you for being patient today. Thank you for your story. It's wonderful. And keep doing the wonderful work.
All right. Thank you, my friend. It was so nice getting to know you too.
Absolutely. Take care.